Hey guys, so in this video I want to go over my fully finished min-max Berserker Crit Slammer. So this will be the last video update. I'll have all the links down below with the budget POB, the crit swap, and like the end game like multi-mirror build like mine. So you have all the options down below. I have a more min-max version down below as well, so you know exactly what to go for if you want to take this character to the absolute max. This character was very strong, was by far one of my strongest league starters ever. It was extremely good all the way from, essentially level 12 to, now. Extremely good in campaign, at least at level 12. Very good for early tier 17s, very good for early mapping. It had insane damage. Very hyped with the character. So yeah, I want to go everything about this character, why I'm going crit, why we're not going to echoes anymore, what you can do for like upgrades, all that. So let's look at the POB first. So this is the final POB. We have 300 million DPS, a 90 max res, 91k LE max hit, 26k Fizz max hit. And this Fizz max hit's actually a little bit higher than what it shows, because most Fizz max hits on POB with spell suppression like doubles this, even though most Fizz hits aren't spells. So in reality, this Fizz hit's actually more than a lot of POBs. Yeah, this is like enough Fizz hit to tank Shaper Slam essentially, which is like the hardest hidden Fizz hit for like general content. This is no guard skill, of course. With guard skill, you're pretty much just not dying. So when you press Valid Molten Shell, for example, you're just like going to be immortal for like 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever. Of course, this is also cast when damage taken, so it procs all the time. So yeah, really good tank stats for tier 17s, Ubers, or whatever. If you did want to farm Ubers, you would go spell suppression route. I didn't go spell suppression route because it's just not needed for like high-end juice mapping. Actually, in general, max res is better for high-end juice mapping because there's map mods that produce your spell suppression, and Fizz's extra goes through spell suppression as well. So I went for the max res route, but you can definitely go for spell suppression as well. So yeah, 300 mil DPS. I would say overall pretty decent for Berserker. Also to keep in mind, this is with Defy Pain, which is essentially a mini Defiance of Destiny. You could also go for more damage and click this and have like 380 mil DPS, but you don't need that much damage. I kill like all tier 17 bosses, even with like triple tank mod in like 10 seconds at most. If there's no tank mod, they die in like 2 seconds. So yeah, you don't need this. Defy Pain is extremely nice because you don't have any avoidance, although you can get avoidance on this character through your Mercenary if you want. But I really like Defy Pain. I did try out Gore Dancer, but I wasn't a big fan. It was decent, but yeah, Defy Pain felt the best to me. Without Tincture, you're at 180 mil DPS, so still really high without Tincture. I only press this on bosses and they always die within the Tincture duration. Yeah, with Tincture, 300 plus mil DPS. For Flask, just go over there real quick. I'm still using a Life Flask. I get this question a lot, is why do I still use a Life Flask? It's because tier 17 mods just really fucking suck. You take a lot of degen both on you and like ground degen, so having a Life Flask makes it a lot smoother, unless your character has a lot of natural life regen. And this character kind of does. 400 life regen per second is pretty respectable, but it's still not enough for like tier 17 degens. So yeah, that's why I prefer having a Life Flask on this character still, because tier 17 degens just absolutely suck. Besides that, Amethyst Flask for Genesis, of course, very good. Granite will reduce curses on you. Also very good because you have nowhere to get curse immune otherwise, or semi-curse immune. Wine the Prophet, I get this question a lot. Is this gold flask worth it? Is it good? I'd say it's okay. It's definitely better on other characters, but I did find it quite worth to use. If you don't want to use this, you can use like anything else, to be honest. I liked it enough to keep it in the build, but yeah, you don't have to use this. Now we'll go over the gear, of course. So let's start the axe. This is the miniature axe. There's actually 3 miniature axes on trade, and at least as far as I can tell, this is the best one. A triple Synthoplus axe with proper suffixes would be the best, but no one has that. The other axe, there's like a Despot axe on trade, which I don't think is good. It's way too fast, and the reason why fast axes are actually pretty bad is because you just run out of exerts. And if you run out of exerts, you don't do any damage anyway, so it doesn't matter if you even attack. So yeah, I do think the Val axe is the best base. If you want the second best base a little bit faster, then a Void axe is also quite good, but I wouldn't use stuff like a Despot axe because it's just way too fast. The damage is pretty mediocre. So yeah, this axe is pretty good. I think it's currently the best miniature axe in the market. That might change in the future though. Helmet. So helmet, this is the most important thing right here, is skills have plus 3% to critical strike chance for each war cry exerted them. This is straight up mandatory for the crit slammer to work. You cannot go crit without this mod. Without this mod, here, let's look at your damage. We take this mod off, had to custom config it. Yeah, you lose half your damage, which is quite bad, Yeah, this helmet mod is straight up mandatory. Make sure you have this helmet mod. It's extremely strong. It's why Crit Slammer is good. The reason why I didn't go Echoes is because Echoes essentially disables more map mods. You can't run as many map mods with Echoes of Curation. It's still a very strong helmet, especially for the non-crit version. But by going crit and not using Echoes, you can run a lot more map modifiers. So yeah, that's why I went crit. It's really strong. I do recommend it. If you are wondering, the only things you need to actually go crit, it's just this crit mod helmet and like 2 accuracy rolls on gear. So like gloves and ring is what I have, for example. Going for a very high armor chest, preferably tier 1 life is optimal on the chest if you can get it. If not, you go triple armor and get life mastery. But yeah, life on chest is actually optimal if you have all tier 1, otherwise triple armor. Important here in the end game version, min max, you're going to want to get an essence modifier, 10% reduced damage from crits per endurance charge. This plus a mastery makes you completely crit immune, extremely nice. To make this chest, you would have to fracture that essence modifier. So you just use essence mod on a royal plate, then 1 in 4 fracture, and then you just do the dense fossils for prefix, and then, you know, finish with the suffix with prefix can't be changed, reforge fizz. So yeah, that is the most optimal chest because this will get you crit immune. Gloves, standard gloves, just accuracy, 39% cold conversion, very important here. The reason why we got 39% is so that we still have 1% fizz damage, and with that 1% physical damage, we can still bleed. Bleeding is important because of yoke. So with yoke, we get 10% increased damage per ailment, and bleeds an ailment. Also, because of the miniature axe as well, if you hit an enemy that's bleeding, you cold them. So yeah, both the yoke and axe makes bleed pretty high value. So make sure you only get 39% cold conversion on the gloves. And that reason why we're converting to cold is to enable Trinity, and also freeze and chill. Freeze and chill is a massive defense, and you freeze everything. You even freeze bosses actually with this amount of cold damage, because your average hit damage, as you can see here, is so stupidly high that you freeze anything in the game, even Ubers. Yeah, the freeze is actually extremely nice. Boots, action speed, intimidate cry, cooldowns the best implicits. Besides that, it's just res boots. You can craft whatever you want in a prefix. I did avoid being chilled. You can get Alan immune here as well, by the way, if you want. So if you want Alan immune, essentially all you would do is get avoid shock on the suffix with an essence. You can get 60% there, and then you get avoid shock and an abyssal 40%. Or you get a void shock on the implicit, which is also 40%, and then you just use Storm Shroud. I didn't go for the Alan immune route because I personally feel like I needed it for these tier 17 juice maps. Obviously, this depends on the type of content you're doing. Some type of content you want to be Alan immune, so this would be worth it. So yeah, if you want to be Alan immune, get Storm Shroud, and then get essentially 100% avoid shock on your boots, or like 60% and then 40% from Abyssal, but that is completely up to you. Yoke of Suffering, insane amulet for this build, allows your elemental damage to shock, otherwise you don't have shock. And once again, because your average damage hit is so high, you're always applying 50% shock at this rate. It's very consistent, which is just a ton of more damage. And of course, the increased damage taken per element, you're doing chill, freeze, shock, ignite, and bleed. You don't have poison. Poison's too inconsistent. It's not working on this build. But yeah, yoke is insane damage. This is pretty much doubling your damage, this one item. That's how strong it is. Rings are pretty simple. You want reduced mana cost on both rings, and increase elemental damage attack skills in most optimal prefix if you want damage, life, and then resist. One ring needs to have attributes. So this ring has some attributes. The only attribute that's really needed is the intelligence. That all attributes you don't need. You can get something else instead. And instead of all attributes, you could get like resist to help you out. And then you just need to lower some skill gems. Headhunter, I always prefer Headhunter for my, end game map choosing builds. You can go Mage Blood, but I do think Headhunter is just better, especially for this build. If you like a crit fizz convert build, Headhunter is insane. There's a ton of insane mods for type of builds like these. So yeah, I prefer Headhunter. I do think Mage Blood is a lot less value in this type of build because you already use Progen or using a tincture. So I'm mostly a 3 flask Mage Blood. And if you want to use Wine of Profit, then it'll be like a 2 flask Mage Blood. So yeah, I do think Mage Blood is pretty low value, but you could go if you want. Besides that, talk about jewels real quick. So you have Forbidden Flesh and Flame, where stealing Valakos, Storm's Embrace. This allows us to easily get 90 max fire res. Essentially all we're doing is getting 3 max fire res on our chest right here. Then we're taking some max fire res nodes. And then we get 3 jewels with max fire res. That's all it is. It's pretty simple. It makes it very easy to get 90 max res, and 90 max res for like tier 17 to any choose content feels insanely good. You pretty much just don't die to LE damage when you have max fire res, and you don't care for like the negative suppression mods like I talked about earlier. Also, something to note real quick, as we're on Ascendencies, you actually could spec Juggernaut. You would lose half your damage, but if you're fine with half the damage for like 30% more EHP or like 30% more max hit, that is a viable option. You would just take Unfliction, Unrelentant, Unyielding, and Unstoppable or Undeniable. You would get like 30 to 40% more max hit at the cost of half your damage. So if you want to do that around the min-max endgame, hey, you're free to do it. Besides that, the other 2 important jewels we want to talk about is Balance of Terror. This is how we solve Trinity. Without this, Trinity is pretty inconsistent. With this, plus cold conversion on gloves, Trinity is very consistent. So the only things we do cast in game, by the way, if you are wondering, every war cry is completely automated. So we just only have to cast Volcanic Fissure during mapping, and then during bosses, I press LA Weakness to curse them and to proc Trinity, of course, with the Balance of Terror. So So that's it. The build is really, really simple. It's not like multi-buttons. You're not doing pianos. It's really just Volcanic Fissure. Then, of course, like, you know, your moving skills, right? Then bosses, you press your ally weakness. The only other potential to talk about is the Impossible Escape. So right here, Impossible Escape with Imbalanced Guard. This is like extremely high value, as you can see. You get this nice node right here, which is like 5% more damage. You get Soul of Steel plus 1 max res, 20% reduced cost of skills. This saves you a skill point, accuracy crit node, and the max res nodes. So really, really nice Imbalanced Guard here. Of course, on my cheaper POB, I won't have this because it's quite expensive. But yeah, very, very nice. Really high value for a Impossible Escape. The other jewels are the standard. They're like crit multi, life, and like max res, like I said. The jewels aren't exactly perfect, but yeah. Launch clusters real quick. So there are 2 different launch clusters. We have 1 launch cluster for Leech. If you're wondering how to solve Leech, you need Fuel the Fight. Then this has Graceful Execution and Martial Prowess to help with accuracy. Martial Prowess actually isn't needed. I had nothing else to do with my skill points, so I still took it. So yeah, Martial Prowess is not needed right here. The other one is just Martial Prowess, Graceful Execution, and Brutal Infamy. It's just the highest damage cluster you can get. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it for the clusters, trees, and all the gear. Skill gems real quick. Volcanic Fissure, these are the most optimized gems you can get. We are using Trinity, and I just talked about that. I wouldn't replace anything here. Frostwing Blood Rage, pretty self-explanatory. Leap Slam press attacks, Blood and Sand Elemental Weakness. Of course, your self-cast Elemental Weakness for Balance of Terror. Mono Shell cast when damage taken. You can also self-cast this if you want, but you know, I like just being lazy and just having that cast when damage taken. Just feels pretty nice. It'll just activate whenever you take damage pretty much. If you have cast when damage taken in level 1, and make sure your Mono Shell stays at level 7. Assassin's Mark, Battle Mage Cry, Auto Exertion, Infernal Cry. So Assassin's Mark is automatically applied to Battle Mage Cry, which is also automatically used because of Auto Exertion. So yeah, a lot of quality of life in this build. Like I said, you don't really press that many buttons. Then Rallying Cry, Intimidating Cry, Auto Exertion, Seismic Cry, Held of Purity, and Enlighten. This is also just to fully automate your war cries in endgame for a ton of quality of life. You already have so much more damage. Does not allow you to self-press them for like even more damage. One last thing. We have a Rune Graph of Treachery here. This is how we solve our mana reservation. POB does not have this yet, so I had to custom config it. But yeah, it's called Rune Graph of Treachery. You can see it in game right here. We are not, essentially you take the life mastery and then you put the rune onto it and it replaces the life mastery with the rune. And it's essentially just free 15% reservation because we don't have auras. So there's no downside to this rune. So keep that in mind. We're not actually using this life mastery. We're just using it for the Rune Graph. Also, quickly go over my Merc. So I did make a whole video about Mercs, especially for this character. So if you want to see that, go watch the last video. But yeah, I'll quickly go over this Merc, why I think it's the best for this build, but there are other options as well. Like I said, watch the last video if you want to see all the options. Yeah, for the Merc, I think this is pretty much the full min-max setup you could do. I think you could have like a better shield, but besides that, I'm pretty happy with everything else. We're to start from the top. So Crown of the Tyrant, extremely strong. Nearby enemies have negative res, and it has flat added damage to you as well. I use a green socket to make Trinity more reliable, but you can use a red socket as well. So yeah, there's a ton of damage, a ton of flat, plus negative all res. Wand, this is just for blind. I don't think there's anything else to use here. You could use a +1 power charge wand if you want to go for another +1 curse with Anathemas. We'll talk about Anathemas next. So Anathemas, your curse limit is equal to your maximum power charges. So they have 3 power charges by default. This is +3 max curses. Like I said, you can get a +1 power charge wand to give yourself 4 curses if you want to apply more curses with your Merc. Pretty good there. Zolf's Heart with Allocate Snowforge. So the Merc does ignite. So this is -5% all resist. And then on top of that, it has nearby enemies are covered in ash, which is 20% increased fire damage taken. Pretty strong amulet for this build. Garber Ethereal, very, very strong, extremely strong chest. And it's mostly why I use this Merc in the first place. This is actually a pure intelligence chest, even though it has strength requirement. So for example, a pure strength Merc cannot use this chest because it's actually a pure int chest. Yeah, extremely strong chest, makes you semi-crit immune, but more importantly, nearby allies' action speed cannot be modified to below base value, essentially making you semi-action speed immune, which is extremely nice in these tier 17 maps where there's a ton of action speed annoyance in these maps. Other ring is flammability on hit. Just a free curse here, nothing else to say. Do try to res cap your Merc. My Merc is res cap and not quite chaos, but that should be fine. Also, life regen is really, really good on your Merc and it helps it keep alive. So I have life regen here, then crash life regen. Shield is just high block and resist. You probably can get life on block here instead. But yeah, you do want like a high block and resist shield. It does help it keep alive. For boots, we're using Legacy of Fury. This applies 15% Scorch, which is -15% all res. Also extremely nice. And this is the only Merc that can use both Legacy of Fury and Garber Ethereal. So you get a nice combo here. Comms Binding, pretty much everyone uses this. Essentially, nearby enemies convert 25% of fizz damage to fire, giving you roughly like 23 to 24% fizz DR depending on your max res. Just extremely nice belt to have. Gloves, only thing here is the exposure on hit on the implicit. So you get some free fire exposure. This goes up to 16% if you want to fully invest into these gloves. Besides that, once again, it's life regen, life resist. So that's the full merc setup. This is the best loadout. The only thing different here is that you can get kinetic bolt instead of barrage, and that is better for applying curses. But yeah, you get Aspiring Cry, gives both increased damage and mana regen. And this is up for like 80 to 90% of the time, especially if it has a cooldown level 3 here. This is like 80% of the time for me, so it's a lot of free damage. Haste, very, very nice. Ally weakness, doesn't matter, you're casting yourself. And then yeah, great kinetic blast, and also if you get kinetic bolt, has great coverage, so it curses everything on screen. Some other options you can do, if you anoint +1 max on power charge and get a +1 max power charge unique one, which is like 1C, you can use Ascedencies Touch with Enfeeble on Implicit Curse, and that'll essentially give you 2 more curses, Temporal Change and Enfeeble. It's a more defensive option. You also get some like free Explode, but that is another route you can take, although you will lose some damage because you replace your gloves, so you lose a fire exposure. You also lose Snow Forge, but that is like a nice route to go as well. And for a cheaper helm option, since this is quite expensive, you can get Ylfbane's Trickery. This is applies a bunch of curses on 2 bosses essentially. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about it for everything about this character. I have the full min-max POV down below, the more budget one, like the starter version as well. The full guide, of course, I had before League Start is still viable as well, the non-crit version. But anyway, that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. But yeah, this character has been extremely fun, and I do recommend it if you want a League Start, if you're starting late or something.